The video game industry has been growing exponentially nearly every single year for 40 years straight. Well, it was until 2022 when everything began to crash and burn. Just today, as of recording, Ubisoft gained $720,000 in value, which would be amazing if they didn't lose $11 billion in value in just the last few years. To give you a visual demonstration of what that looks like, if this star is how much money they gained, this black hole is how much money they've lost. Except I lied. The black hole is 80 times larger than the star, while the money hole should be 15,000 times larger. 4 decades of hiring hidden talent and publishing landmark titles, only to plummet in both quality and reputation in only 4 years. And it's not just Ubisoft. Gaming as a whole is collapsing in on itself. Over the past few years, growth didn't just slow down, video games have actually been shrinking more and more, leading to worldwide higher-ups cutting funding by almost 80%. How does this happen? How can global studios go from multi-billion-dollar industry Goliaths to laughable industry punching bags in so short a time? How can 40 years of dominance be erased in 3? It's too fast a drop to be explained by one single cause, so maybe we should ask a different question. What happens when an industry whose success is designed around rampantly growing the number of users every year maxes out on how many new people they can grab? When you've dug hole after hole of pure gold for 40 years, but suddenly there's no more space to dig. Today we're exploring the dramatic implosion of gaming studios around the world and how that may trickle down to even your favorite indie titles. How decades of growth created an impossible bubble where anything other than the line shooting up means record-breaking layoffs every year. And how a small studio might hope to break through in their own way amid sweeping changes and catastrophic economic conditions far outside their control. I know I set up a lot here, and I promise we'll get to it all, but video game struggling means my wallet is also struggling, so let me fulfill this contractual obligation. And thank you so much to Rake for sponsoring this part of the video. Last time I talked about their everyday earbuds, I mentioned the active noise cancellation and snug ear fit being great for when I use this treadmill I found on the street, but now that I'm putting it back on the street, they're great for lugging it down 4 flights of stairs too. My neighbors might hear each and every playing on the steps, but with Raycon, I am at peace. And if I really wanted to hear their yelling, I could click on awareness mode too, but that's if I wanted to. I'm rocking the rose gold with the Galaxy case here, but if you want more colors, the Everyday Earbuds Classic is back for the back to school season with a whole bunch more. It's my favorite time of the year because I can choose to relive my middle school days. And immediately re-forget them. Raycon's 32-hour battery life with the case and quick charge function with 10 minutes of charge granting 90 minutes of playtime is perfect to ensure I'm stuck with my thoughts for as little time as possible. And their multi-point connectivity means I can pair it with both my normal phone and my toilet phone at once. Check out buyraycon.com/eggsoup to get 20% off site-wide. And if you don't like them, there's a 30-day return guarantee. Easy to pair, 33-foot range if you're European, that's a 10-meter range. Buyraycon.com/eggsoup. Thank you again to Raycon for sponsoring this part of the video. Remember that question about the well and digging hole after hole until there's no more space left to dig? If you answered to cannibalize yourself digging as deep as you possibly can back into the very same well, charging all of your existing players more and more again and again, congratulations are in order, you might be in line for an executive position. This why studios are pushing for more and more monetization is the leading question to ask throughout this whole video, and hopefully by the end we'll reach an answer together that's infinitely more satisfying than just saying they want more money, because of course they want more money. We'll be returning to this question again at the very end. It's actually my favorite part of the video. If you only watch one part, I'd want you to watch that, because I know it's a winding road to get there, but you clicked on an hour-long video essay about video games, so you knew what you were getting into. Got defensive. When it comes to greed, players are very quick to point at Ubisoft as one of the key contributors in the downfall of the modern gaming industry. Much like EA, Ubisoft is a name so tarnished it's become automatic taboo. but it wasn't always that way. In fact, they were celebrated as trailblazers in the industry alongside other renowned companies at the time like Blizzard and Bethesda, which is also funny now. I do want to say, I'm not trying to celebrate this downfall. Going from a $12 billion company in 2021 to a $1 billion company in 2025 is a staggering decline, and it means people far outside of the decision-making seats lose their jobs. Not to mention how the deterioration of a studio once on top of the world means a deterioration of things many of us hold dear. So I'm talking about this as an examination of the rapidly changing times we live in. Ubisoft's tale is one of stellar developers racing against lofty corporate objectives, and while it seems simple on the surface, the greater story goes far beyond this one company. Founded in 1984 as Guillemot, Informatique, and rebranding 2 years later to Ubisoft, the French company acted primarily as a video game distributor throughout the 80s, focusing mainly on small projects and local licenses. They were definitely not known for making hit titles. Things really picked up for Ubisoft when they took a chance on hiring a very young developer named Michel Ancel, who catapulted the company into global recognition with his flagship franchise Rayman in 1995. Keep this in the back of your mind. They took a risk, and the company thrived. With both critical acclaim and critical success now in their belt, Ubisoft expanded rapidly, opening dev studios in Montreal, Shanghai, and Germany. And this brand of rapid expansion was just a taste of what was to come. Each decade, Ubisoft seemed to reinvent themselves and continue pushing the envelope of the gaming industry. The early 2000s marked their next reinvention, acquiring the rights to Tom Clancy in 2000 and releasing Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell in 2002, an action stealth game frequently cited on lists containing the best video games, and followed up with sequels in 2004, 2005, 2006, 2010, and 2013. 1 year after Splinter Cell, Ubisoft released the 2003 E3 Game of the Year, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, with sequels in 2004, 2005, and 2010. 2003 also marked the year of Michel Ancel's next project, Beyond Good and Evil, with a sequel in... actually, we'll get to that one. 2004, Far Cry 1, and 2007, their biggest hit yet, Assassin's Creed. A game so enticing, so different from anything out at the time, and Assassin's Creed 2 just a couple years later took everything that made the original great and did it better. Better story, better characters, better gameplay. Ezio achieved a feat essentially no other protagonist in the early 2000s ever could. He was actually cool. 2009 also marked the release of the major commercial success Just Dance, Ubisoft's foray into a completely different audience. This diversification only served to grow the company further, with follow-ups of course in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and every subsequent year up to 2025, and if we're lucky, likely beyond. This was Ubisoft's franchise foundation era. It's where they dug their heels in and created the IPs that would carry them over the next couple phases. And following up on the staggering success of Assassin's Creed, the 2010s would be yet another decade where the company would transform. This decade would be the peak of Ubisoft. Michel Ancel returned to direct Rayman Origins in 2011 and Rayman Legends in 2013, critically acclaimed platformers far surpassing the original, with Legends specifically lauded by many as one of the best platformers of all time. Far Cry 3 in 2012, often considered Ubisoft's greatest game ever, blew the door down for the rest of their open world games to walk through. Assassin's Creed Black Flag in 2013, Watch Dogs in 2014, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege in 2015, and The Division in 2016, which was the fastest selling new IP ever at the time. However, while it was their highest peak yet, the golden seeds Ubisoft planted with Far Cry and Assassin's Creed in the early 2010s would be the catalysts for their eventual downfall. It was clear open world domination had become the company's new MO in this new era, but this is also where the cracks started to form. Far Cry 4, while good, did not provide the same sequel caliber upgrade as Assassin's Creed 2 did compared to Assassin's Creed 1. Watch Dogs was riddled with game-breaking bugs, and The Division, despite that incredible launch, failed to fully live up to its massive open-world scope. While the 2010s marked Ubisoft's greatest expansion and largest profits yet, it was also the era where the rapid release fatigue started to slowly reach not just the players, but the developers too. It wasn't understood by the general public at the time, but behind the scenes crunch, delayed releases, and diminishing returns with each and every sequel revealed a long-term unsustainability with their publishing model. A publishing model, mind you, that nearly every big studio was also using at the time. At some point, the line can't keep going up at the same pace, but when all of their systems require it to keep functioning, something is going to give. It would work incredibly for now, but in 5-10 years, maybe not. Make no mistake, Ubisoft was bigger than ever, but the once indomitable giant began to have its reputation slip. Amidst all of these problems taking place in the offices themselves, the company at this point clearly had grown to a point where the desires and wills of the few far outweighed the desires and the wills of the many. And the company saw the writing on the wall, recognizing that if game sales numbers weren't going to exponentially increase to match the exponential growth of the company, something else would have to in its stead. And not long after, they began formally introducing in-game sales, kicking off the modern live service era of Ubisoft as we know it. Microtransaction-riddled multiplayer experiences, online-only requirements for single-player games, and an ever-creeping increase in grindiness to incentivize time-saving purchases from their fanbase, the definition of a Ubisoft game began to change. What was once a compliment of high esteem referring to a quality industry-shaking release now meant the same thing you've been seeing for the past 5 years, but somehow more hollow. Just Dance was just the beginning. While follow-ups like Assassin's Creed Origins in 2017 and Assassin's Creed Odyssey in 2018 sought to dramatically expand the scope of the franchise, their receptions were mixed, with a common critique citing not only their numerous bugs and unfinished features, but how somehow this was still the same game 10 years later. Not only that, this once beloved action-adventure series now had microtransactions galore. Ubisoft started deliberately slowing the game down just enough so that a subsection of their players would get frustrated and open their wallets to spend even more on a time-saving resource pack. A strategy so blatant, most players were understandably frustrated and felt disrespected. This company clearly just saw them as moneybags. Sure, the quality of the game might have suffered, but it worked. Line must go up, so they'll find a way to make it go up. New year, new release, and if sales aren't improving, crunch the devs, charge players more, cut risky titles, halt investments in smaller devs. The line must go up. Because if it starts to waver, the investors start to get scared. And you can't have the investors scared because all of the executive jobs justify their own existence by justifying their existence. Far Cry Primal copy and pasting the map from Far Cry 4 likely to meet release demands, The Division 2 failing to reach audience and sales expectations and increasing the push for in-game purchases, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint with 2 paid currencies, and so much backlash before full release that Ubisoft had to pull their time savers grind skipping microtransaction entirely. And keep in mind, these are all for games you already paid for. Some of the audience would say it's not that much, it's optional, it's not a big deal, but unfortunately, this was only the beginning. Assassin's Creed Brawlhalla in 2022 had much the same buggy release issues as its predecessor, and while they ditched the controversial XP gain booster, paying to bypass an intentional grind was alive and well, with unique armor, weapons, silver, and resources to progress faster. Beyond Good and Evil 2, announced in 2008 and re-announced in 2017, has still yet to come out, with Michel Ancel retiring from Ubisoft in 2020 to focus on his passion for wildlife and animals. His other title, Wild, was also cancelled last year. With their star visionary rightfully earning a happy retirement, Ubisoft's future banked on their established franchises. But those very established franchises were slipping in the public eye. The 2020s rapidly became a free-fall for the company. Hyperscape, a promising neo-futuristic battle royale, attempted a Twitch streamer-fueled release campaign, but according to The Verge, dropped to, quote, abysmal viewership just 1 day after release. Launched in July 2020, the game shut down just 2 years later. Franchise sequels like Watch Dogs Legion, the aforementioned Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Far Cry 6, Rainbow Six Extraction, Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope, Assassin's Creed Mirage, and Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown all failed to meet expectations from the fans, or failed to meet sales numbers in the rare cases of favorable reviews. All the while, the stock price continued to drop further and further as the 2020s went on. Their original releases too were plagued by the Ubisoft type game moniker, as Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora sold decently well and was praised for its beautiful world, but criticized for essentially the same things that people had been criticizing every other Ubisoft game for. Yes, it was cool, but its repetitive gameplay loop basically made it Far Cry Blue.0. XDefiant, a free-to-play FPS game, launched in 2024 with a record 1 million players within 2.5 hours, but failed to keep those players around for its subsequent updates. Like Hyperscape, XDefiant shut down its servers entirely and is no longer available to play as of a couple months ago. Skull and Bones, which came out just a few months before XDefiant, boasted a $70 price tag and was advertised as the world's premier quadruple A game, and then fell flat in the market, of course, alongside its in-game store, battle pass, seasonal events, and premium currency. The nail in the coffin for Ubisoft's late 2010s, early 2020s live service era was Star Wars Outlaws, a game whose team consisted of around 600 developers and overwhelmingly failed to reach its sales targets. Despite the powerful Star Wars brand name, the $70 price tag paired with $110 and $130 pre-order editions alongside less than enthusiastic early reviews dragged the game and Ubisoft's image down even further. Outlaws wasn't terrible, but a 6 to 7-ish out of 10 game in the modern era, especially with the global economic state, is not enough to turn the ship around. Following Star Wars Outlaws' release, Ubisoft's stock, which had recovered slightly from its dramatic decline in 2021 to 2024 with an outperforming Q1, suddenly dropped to record lows with a 10% hit in less than 2 days. That was a catastrophic loss. And while we now understand the game alone wasn't responsible for Ubisoft's staggering loss in valuation, a new breach in the hull of a sinking ship is gonna do a whole lot of damage. The numbers tell you it was $12 billion built up over 40 years, only to crumble in 4. But looking at the releases, this decline was in motion perhaps as far back as 2013. Modern-day Ubisoft appears to be stuck in a rut left behind by their money-printing past. Assassin's Creed's newest entry, Shadows, released in March of this year, cited by many as the best in the series in over a decade, and reaching the highest player count on Steam the series had ever seen. And according to Ubisoft's mid-2025 financial results that came out last month as of making this video, the game did perform in line with expectations, although they stated they won't disclose the number of units sold. But even assuming Shadows had highly favorable results, Ubisoft remains as much in the hole as they've ever been. And it seems the days of an Assassin's Creed or a Far Cry release catapulting the company into the stratosphere are long gone. Their future release schedule doesn't inspire much enthusiasm either. Assassin's Creed Jade, a mobile game, The Division 3, Assassin's Creed Codename Hex, Assassin's Creed Codename Invictus, a remake of Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, a remake of Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, franchises established in the early 2000s, given the imposing, nigh impossible task of keeping the company afloat. Microtransactions aplenty to siphon as much as possible from their remaining player base and report positively to the shareholders, no doubt. For what it's worth, after what became a much more lengthy retrospective than I anticipated, I genuinely do not have any ill will towards any developer working at the company. I think that would be crazy. Nor do I truly believe they initially set out to vampirically feed on the most diehard subsection of their fans. Ubisoft seems to be an all too familiar tale of success leading to rapid growth, and that rapid growth granting the chance to push profits even further if they doubled down. So they chose to double down and then quadruple down, expand, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar company, but all of these decisions have ballooned their expenses to the point where any slowing down would cause a systematic implosion from the top down. They've dipped into the well of shareholder interest over player satisfaction too many times to go back. And now the company seems like a house of cards held up by Assassin's Creeds and Far Cries and their Tom Clancy IP. A house of cards, mind you, where somehow the top layer is all Benjamins. All the while, ex-Ubisoft developers are proving it's not about their own incompetency, it's clearly a larger company issue as they've released some of the biggest hits of the past couple years, Stray and most recently, Expedition 33. What's sobering, however, is I could have replaced Ubisoft with what seems to be an endlessly growing list of companies, and the conclusion would be basically the same. Tracking the aforementioned Blizzard, Bethesda, EA, Activision, Take-Two would tell an almost identical story. Developing and/or publishing landmark titles, hiring legendary developers that create an iconic franchise, and then pushing out game after game after game after game until every game is the same as last year and everything becomes riddled with Skinner box monetization strategies. Gaming has changed. The stakes are more global than ever, and the commodification of attention is more a focus than ever. I mean, look where we are right now. It's YouTube, that's what we're all about here. So let's zoom out for a second and examine what is going on economically to answer why all of this is going down, and why all of this is going down now, specifically. Because it's much bigger than you may think. I'll be citing Matthew Ball's The State of Video Gaming presentation and the Game Developers Conference State of the Game Industry 2025 report for much of this section. I'm certainly no expert, so the credit for researching the statistics goes to the original authors. Apologies if I misinterpret any data. In the decade between 2011 and 2021, the video game industry absolutely exploded. It beat external expectations, it beat internal expectations, and its spending significantly beat global growth benchmarks like the world's real GDP by 3.3x. Basically, they were on top of the world, with media outlets reporting video games decimating the traditional media giants of film, TV, Broadway, books, and even music. But between 2022 and 2024, not only did the gaming industry as a whole fall short of expectations, it flattened out entirely, with billions of hours of playtime and billions of dollars of spending less than anticipated. And this is even accounting for a drop-off post-pandoozy now that people could leave their homes. Fast forward to today, and the industry is shrinking despite increasing spending on books, music, and digital video. All of those are doing better, but gaming for some reason is doing worse. Seeing these trends, venture capitalist investments and/or publisher funding dropped dramatically, and many studios now can't find the funding necessary to finish and release their games. That goes especially for smaller studios under a larger umbrella, many of which have been shut down entirely well into their development cycle. So what is happening? In short, innovation seen in the last couple decades from sources like mobile gaming, free-to-play models, battle royales, battle passes, live services, cross-platform experiences, user-generated content, and proliferous social features grabbed millions and millions of new players and increased playtime and spending by billions. However, most of those resources are used up. The Battle Royale explosion is mostly over, as anyone who would be hooked by the format is already playing it, or as we're starting to see now more frequently, done playing it. Battle passes are tired and live services are everywhere. And maybe most importantly, mobile phones, which made up 70% of that massive spending growth, have little room to expand. Most people living in high-spending areas already have smartphones now, so the industry isn't going to see another humongous explosion there. And the new experiments that these big studios use to try and continue the same rate of growth have yet to pay off at all, and many have become huge money holes. Cloud gaming, subscription services, virtual reality, esports, these are not enough to push the line up, much less shoot the entire industry up like the aforementioned drivers of the 2011 to 2021 era. And somehow, that's still not all. Remember that part about mobile games making up a significant portion of the industry? Well, there's something else on phones that popped up around the same time gaming started to decline. That's taking up more and more hours of the average person's day year over year. TikTok. Online video is cannibalizing not just mobile gaming time, but time from all activities. If video game studios want a chance at getting new players, they have to spend an increasing amount of marketing money to pull them away from TikTok, like Monopoly Go, which spent over a third of their revenue purely on user acquisition. Add on the fact that big games are significantly more expensive to make than ever, competition is fiercer than ever, inflation is making $60 releases worth less every year, yet audiences are remaining mostly resistant to price increases, top games are continuing to release massive updates every quarter, and the global economy is making life more difficult for everyone, United States or otherwise, and the picture seems more clear. Games are struggling, so they rely on players to spend more to make up the difference. But players are struggling too, so they spend less on games. The games then ramp up the intensity of the monetization, whales are able to purchase more, which keeps the companies afloat, while the majority of the players get frustrated. So the reliance from the games on their monetization grows further and it loops all the way back around again. To sum it all up, the features that allowed gaming to explode are no longer as effective. The new strategies didn't work, there are more attention-siphoning activities that take up more of people's day, games are more expensive to make, investors are less likely to invest, and economic challenges make it a less appealing hobby for everyone across the globe. Game studios now have less of a reason to take on risk than ever before, so they cancel title after title, and big investors continue to pull out. All the while, the people actually making the games are getting fired at all-time highs 3 years in a row. That's not to mention the cascading effects of quality drops and reputation decline that come from it. A success in the eyes of shareholders is not necessarily a success in the eyes of the players, as we've seen from the short-term numbers of Ubisoft's 2010s era into their rapid decline during the 2020s. You can see why they're kind of the perfect example, and it's a brutal cycle. Stagnation with rising costs means games fail to meet expectations. Failing to meet expectations means companies try to minimize risks, which leads to fewer games and fewer innovative studios coming out. Therefore, less innovation, less hits, and players don't stick around, which leads to stagnation with rising costs, and that cycle repeats too. Perhaps the answer lies in smaller studios, independent games with far less overhead and a more intimate connection between players and developers. Games that, in order to reach an audience, may partner with larger studios to find the success they rightfully deserve. So now let's visit our small-scale example that can help make sense of an otherwise nebulous global-scale picture: the slow corruption of Brawlhalla. Today, we're using the falling reputation of Brawlhalla as a case study for global gaming industry changes, alongside the publisher's alleged illegal underpinnings that appear to be behind it on first glance. And finally, how Brawlhalla, in their own way, is attempting to maintain their identity amidst forces far beyond their scope. And don't worry if you've never played or even heard of Brawlhalla, they're just our example and perhaps a warning for other games you may enjoy, because the real meat of what we're gonna get into affects all of us. As Ubisoft's struggles became more and more apparent, Brawlhalla, a game whose community has historically praised the accessibility and what felt like fair monetization practices, has steeply increased the commodification of their game. A free-to-play model that once rose far above their direct competitors has quickly sank in reputation and lost much of the trust they worked to earn through a decade of consistent updates. The connection here seems simple. Ubisoft started struggling, so they pushed the red button on one of their reliable moneymakers. Players and legacy be damned, the bottom line was more important. But I'm not so sure that's the case, as somehow this story has become far more complicated than it initially appeared.
I'm going to address y'all. We see your feedback.
That's where we made the mistake.
Trust us, you are heard.
I wish we did it differently.
Don't worry, we see it. Taking chip damage over here. We know. We know.
Brawlhalla is a cash cow, so Ubisoft forces Brawlhalla to push out more and more updates with greater and greater commodification of the experience. That's the theory anyway among much of the fanbase. And it's not a bad one, albeit it feels incomplete. I'm talking about Brawlhalla today for a couple important reasons. Firstly, this is the community of my childhood, and looking at it in 2025 is staggeringly different from 2015, 2018, 2021, and even as recently as 2024. But probably more critically to the actual conversation, it's not too late for Brawlhalla. They haven't slid all the way down yet. We're not looking at innocent little Charmander, but we're not looking at Mega Charizard either. Brawlhalla is like a perfect Charmeleon, and while recent reviews suggest it's heading down the path of becoming a glorified billboard, it's still a good distance away from that. It hasn't fully evolved yet, or maybe devolved is a better word there, even if it breaks the Charmeleon analogy. We're seeing a game that can go in either direction. And as you'll find out by the end of this video, Brawlhalla will serve as a representation for the online gaming industry as a whole. So to truly understand that, let's talk about what this game actually is. In short, Brawlhalla is a platform fighting game, originally developed at a time where pretty much every platform fighter not named Super Smash Bros. Failed miserably. And that's very different from today. Brawlhalla was a unicorn of a game, building their way up slowly and organically through heartfelt developer interaction, hiring staff directly from their community, and supporting their competitive scene with prize pools rivaling that of major esports organizations. Yes, it's the butt of every joke and it looks like a Flash game because it kind of is literally a Flash game, but the developers and the early core players loved Brawlhalla in a way that you will rarely ever find in the modern gaming atmosphere. It was something truly special. But when a game that hovered in reviews from the high 80% to 90%, indicating between overwhelmingly positive and very positive on Steam from its release all the way up until the past few months where it's clocking mid-60s, clearly something is going on. This is a story with complex community-developer relationships, and then a publisher comes in, but the community can't talk to the publisher, they only talk to the developer, and I guess the developer kind of represents the publisher. Stick with me here. You'll see why there are examples today. Let's rewind to March 2nd, 2018, a few years into Brawlhalla's life cycle, and more importantly, the date Ubisoft acquired Brawlhalla. If you remember the timeline, Ubisoft was nearing the peak of their corporate success at this point. Brawlhalla was created by a small indie team in Atlanta, Georgia, but with this acquisition, it would be difficult to still call them an indie title. But getting funding from such a large company, as well as IP rights to Rayman and Assassin's Creed, seemed like a big win for the Brawlhalla team. And investing in the largest fighting game on PlayStation and Steam seemed like a big win for Ubisoft as well. As time ticked forward, however, a small subsection of the Brawlhalla community became more and more disillusioned with this big dog involvement, and started directing a greater proportion of their frustration with anything monetization related towards Ubisoft. New skin prices, new battle passes, new battle pass deluxe tracks, crossovers like Street Fighter and Adventure Time, you name it, Ubisoft was to blame. Now, this is where some nuance needs to be injected into the story. What's important to understand is the majority of the community was not blaming Ubisoft at the time, but kind of celebrating them. They were stoked as the core identity of this free-to-play game they loved remained basically intact, while still getting a new form of legitimacy and attention from large IPs previously inaccessible to the fanbase. Brawlhalla didn't just have Lord Brax now, it had Rayman, it had SpongeBob. And that brought in a ton of new players, which of course people loved. Yes, the new crossovers were more expensive than anything seen previously, and top competitive players often lamented about the change in animations, but at the end of the day, they were just expensive skins, and those that wanted to pay could pay. Those that didn't have to. Additionally, this is something we're gonna get into later, it's impossible to know where exactly these new crossover skin decisions were coming from, whether it was Ubisoft enabling these greater investments and therefore Brawlhalla justifiably raised their prices, or was it Ubisoft forcing these higher prices onto their new studio? That's something we might never know. Regardless, this back and forth became a complicated relationship for the community. Brawlhalla would be successful without Ubisoft. True. And at the same time, much of Brawlhalla's greater success, its modern success, is owed to Ubisoft, or at least owed to those crossovers. And the majority of the community, me included, actually really likes the Brawlhalla devs. We like them a lot, and it's very clear they love their jobs and love the game they're creating, which is what makes this so tricky. From 2018 to the end of 2024, Brawlhalla's list of crossovers exploded. to include characters from Shovel Knight, Rayman, Hellboy, Adventure Time, WWE, Steven Universe, Tomb Raider, Ben 10, The Walking Dead, Kung Fu Panda, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Street Fighter, G.I. Joe, Assassin's Creed, Castlevania, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Halo, Tekken, SpongeBob, Star Wars, Borderlands, and Mega Man, with many like WWE and Star Wars featuring multiple events spaced out over the years. These crossovers, with the exception of Rayman and Ezio, all acted as skins for existing characters, and although the roster of characters outside of Brawlhalla eventually exceeded the actual original character list, the majority of the community was still on board. Each release had a vocal minority opposed to them from announcement day, but ultimately they helped to keep the game alive and reach new audiences, which was a net positive. The main issue was Brawlhalla's slow rate of integrating new features into the game amidst these skins and crossovers. Development speed hadn't appeared to change at all since Ubisoft got involved, but what had changed was the monetization. Hence, more simmering of the distaste for Ubisoft and a questioning of where the true priorities of the game laid. As the list grew and grew, competitive integrity also began clashing more and more with the creativity required to make these crossovers unique. But it wasn't until the third Star Wars event where even die-hard supportive members of the community started getting irritated. Crossovers were already by far the most expensive item in the shop. Average skins in this Brawlhalla are anywhere from 80 to 200 mammoth coins, which translates to around $4 to $10. And that price isn't really brought down for other countries or territories, so if you're in Brazil, good luck. Each crossover came in at 300 mammoth coins, but then they started introducing mythic crossovers, which came in at 400, a modification anywhere from 2 to 5 times more expensive than its cheaper counterpart. And finally, with this Star Wars event, they released their first ever 500 mammoth coin skin. The justification? This skin would offer a brand new type of cosmetic item, the companion, that would follow your player character in a match bundled alongside it. This was a staggering decision for a studio that had prided themselves on making the free-to-play live service model work in as non-exploitative a way as feasible. Obviously, there's some contention there, but the exact way to phrase it is not as important as the ethos of Brawlhalla the players appreciated most. The devs genuinely cared about the game and genuinely cared about the players. That was undeniable for nearly a decade, but now something felt like it was changing. Or more accurately, it was slowly changing over the last handful of years until the final month of 2024, where they fully stepped on the gas with this Mandalorian skin. And then it just kept going. February 2025, Brawlhalla's biggest update in over 2 years, with this brand new weapon Chakram featuring mode-switching gameplay never before seen, blah blah blah, and snuck under everybody's noses, the first introduction of store bundles, a seemingly innocuous in-game purchase that would offer you a discount if you bought a select collection of items together. Bundles are not a problem. This understandably flew under the radar, and not even people whose jobs are to cover everything new in Brawlhalla noticed this. Fast forward to March 12th, 2025. Brawlhalla's St. Patrick's Day event launched with a highlighted new skin for their most popular character, but for the first time, this skin was locked behind a 480 mammoth coin bundle. An ordinary skin now nearly at the price of the Mandalorian just a few months prior, but without those additional features that they said was the reason for its additional cost. Rather, you got these other items bundled together with it. And then came the big one. Just 2 weeks after this Mordex bundle, Brawlhalla released their brand new Destiny 2 crossover, featuring 3 bundles for each of the 3 skins at 470 mammoth coins each, or a 1,085 mammoth coin bundle with all 3 new skins, 3 of those new companion cosmetics, and an exclusive weapon skin. The prices are one thing, that's another conversation entirely. The main issue is that Brawlhalla may have legitimately broken the law through this bundle, and in fact, in all the previous bundles as well. You see, these bundles are advertised anywhere from 11% to 35% off, and on the surface, that's cool. Bundles are honestly a good feature for you if you legitimately want everything inside of it. And if you're a big Destiny 2 fan and wanted these skins, this would be a great deal. However, the discount didn't actually exist. These Brawlhalla bundles all feature exclusive items that are impossible to purchase outside of the bundle, meaning there are no savings taking place for the customer. 1,085 mammoth coins is always the full price and was always intended to be the full price. Yet it's advertised as if this is an incredibly good deal. And look, Amazon does this, eBay does this, Target and Best Buy and Microsoft and every company under the sun does this, and at the end of the day, we live in a world where it's up to the consumer to decide if the cost presented to them is worth the satisfaction they get from the item or service. The main difference here is the Brawlhalla community just expected better. They expected better from the Brawlhalla team. When Amazon scams you, well, it's Amazon. Doesn't feel good, but you kind of know it's happening. Brawlhalla fans hold Brawlhalla to higher standards because that's the relationship they've always had. So you can imagine how these bundles now advertised right on your homepage cued instant backlash from the community, as again, they had built up a decade of rapport and trust with this team. It felt out of left field for the identity of the game they had always believed in, and whether or not this influenced those choices, people started pointing out that both of the original co-founders had now left Brawlhalla's studio, so perhaps the original vision of Brawlhalla many of us grew up playing truly didn't exist anymore. Or worse, it wouldn't be able to survive in the modern gaming landscape. The player base was mostly quiet with those early February and March bundles. A lot of people didn't even know they existed, which also featured the same type of fake discounts on bundle exclusive items, which you gotta think maybe was strategic. It was like a slow drip feed to grow accustomed to the system until the egregious Destiny 2 packages blew the door down. And you'd think now with the backlash, Brawlhalla would shift directions and avoid making this mistake in the future, especially with community members from the EU and Brazil, two of their biggest fan bases in particular, pointing out the dubious legality of this practice where they're from. But it only got worse from there. We're up to May 2025, when Brawlhalla released Ascended Nyx, a 1,120 mammoth coin skin with brand new exclusive features never before seen in the game. Except it's not 1,120 mammoth coins, you can get it in a bundle with a fantastic deal cutting 20% off the price. Sound familiar? Because that's right, that 20% deal never existed in the first place, as the only place to purchase the Ascended Nyx skin is in the bundle. Cue backlash, cue expectations for change, and guess what? It only got worse from there. July 30th, 2025, Brawlhalla released Ascended Wushang, another 1,120 mammoth coin skin with brand new exclusive features only ever seen before with the other 1,120 mammoth coin skin, except it's not 1,100 mammoth coins. You can get it in a bundle with a fantastic deal cutting off 20% of the price and a brand new palette swap for your characters for $20, something that had been free for a decade. And what's actually worse is if you didn't want to pay the 400 mammoth coins for this color swap, you could pay 10 to get it for just one character. But don't get too excited because it's actually completely random and you have a 1 in 66 chance to get it for the character you want. This fired up the community like nothing else. Not only did they add more illegal bundles, not only did they charge for something that had always been free, but now they were introducing more gambling into the store under the guise of it being a great deal for all their players. These are, of course, small potatoes in the grand scheme of gaming monetization, but to bring it back around, this Charmeleon was starting to level up, and the community was desperately holding B. People always come in and say it's just a skin, you don't have to buy it, and every company does this, stop complaining about this, you have it easy, but that's not really the point here. The community is frustrated, I think rightfully, by the increasing commodification of something they once loved and something they appreciated for the very fact that it was not a glorified shop. Key figures that had stuck around through the highest and lowest moments were becoming more disillusioned with the game than ever before. And that's perhaps what sucks most about these recent events. We love the game. We want the game to succeed. We want the game to thrive, to sell their skins, to sell their merchandise. We want to support the devs and in turn get to see and enjoy updates for our decade-old game. We want to be able to still play it online, play it with our friends, and it's not enjoyable to be upset. Inviting seemingly irrelevant negativity into our lives is far from pleasurable. I mean, maybe not ours. Me, I don't like it. Speaking personally, I hate doing this, and in the 9 years I've been making Brawlhalla videos, maybe 4 videos total have been outright pessimistic. All 4 have been this year. But whether or not this is another entry in the long list of Ubisoft franchises siphoned by greed feels like it matters less than the story of a small studio in a gaming community that used to adore them, thrust apart by a schism of monetary-fueled growth amidst global economic and gaming industry changes. It feels like the same story we've seen before and sadly become quite desensitized to, losing yet another piece of beautiful potential that the online world can offer in order for corporations to push up their bottom line. The game and its community were never perfect, despite my rose-tinted reflection of it, but it was undeniably special. And perhaps it's just the nature of time, of life, to see the things you love change around you and to realize that you must change too. A tale of 2D palette swaps and flash animation effects for blue coins is ultimately trivial, a tiny drop in a huge pond. But life is those little things. That's what we are. A series of in-betweens one after another until the last little thing occurs. So maybe it's okay if this matters, and maybe it's okay to be sad about it. I don't know who I'm talking to with that sentence. Ubisoft became a titan because of their constant innovation, but a huge chunk of their innovation is gone now with the low-risk strategy of restricting investments and only going with the big names. Rainbow Six is their other live service, Golden Goose, coming in at anywhere from twice to 4 times the size of Brawlhalla based on online estimations. And from their early 2025 financial reports, it's going well. I'm not a part of that community, I'm not well versed enough to speak on it, so I won't weigh in there, but I'm sure the Brawlhalla report is much the same. Dollar numbers up, so it's good. Quality notwithstanding, of course. The same thing that happened to Brawlhalla, amazing game, bigger publisher comes in, reputation slips, happened as well to Risk of Rain 2, one of my other favorite games of all time. Hopoo Games passed the buck to Gearbox, who subsequently pushed out the worst update the game had ever seen, with a buggy, unfinished DLC and a patch to all versions of the game that broke the physics so much the creators started making bug tier lists. Much like Brawlhalla, I know the people working on the game love and care for it, but the higher up decision making, whether internal or external, made everyone else suffer. Risk of Rain 2's new team eventually made it right, and I'm very happy they did, but the reputation damage was done, and I hope Brawlhalla does not go down the same path. The story here is still unfolding, as you can probably tell by the dates, but it does have a happy-ish next chapter that we'll get to. But I think we've dove far enough into this topic to connect it all the way back around. It's time to revisit the global gaming statistics now with our good friend Brawlhalla. We're gonna get into the weeds a little bit, but it'll be important to understand this first for the conclusion we can draw from later. Because to start, Brawlhalla is checking nearly every box. Free-to-play, live service, cross-platform model with battle passes and social integrations that acquired an untapped market of players, but is now facing difficulty growing and by some metrics appears to be shrinking. Check. Steep competition from gaming competitors and non-gaming competitors alike amidst growing economic turmoil, and a larger studio less willing to risk innovation for fear it may not return profitable, in a time when profits are already down. Check. And finally, more aggressive monetization and a change in identity to preserve the growth trends for as long as possible, not to mention an internal community frustrated with the lack of innovative changes to the gameplay. Check. It seems like Brawlhalla has not scaled up dramatically, still running a lean team, with perhaps licensing fees for their crossovers being the largest uptick in the modern Brawlhalla era. We don't know. Regardless, it's clear they're trying to push up profits for one reason or another. Perhaps stagnation in their growth is creating fears about the longevity of the game, and thus driving up numbers now is a big priority. But for the community, enthusiasm for Brawlhalla is at an all-time low, and the studio sees this response closely. The dev team started asking for mass feedback more in the past few months than they have in the 9 years since their Steam release. They surveyed demographics to inquire if their core players were migrating to other games, to Fortnite and Rivals and Minecraft and Roblox, among others. They started hosting office hours streams showing in-progress work in a casual human face to an outraged fanbase, which we'll actually come back to at the very end of the video. But all the while, with new feature announcements and long-awaited prototypes of community requests, the bundles kept coming, and then more bundles, more gambling. You know the story now. So it's complicated. It seems like Brawlhalla has wanted to shift their priorities with new directorial direction, something the community is fully on board with. But what's a mystery is if that increased ambition is also the reason for the increased monetization. According to an unconfirmed source, among Brawlhalla's 30 to 40 person staff, fewer than 5 work as full dedicated programmers to make the game itself. Now, I cannot confirm this claim, and the source would prefer to remain anonymous, so if you leave this video without buying it, I completely understand. To be honest, I'm not sure I buy it entirely either, as I know Brawlhalla's devs wear a lot of hats. But the specifics here are honestly not that important. The general story is how Brawlhalla has always had a very small team relative to its size. Despite being the most played fighting game in the world for much of its lifespan, updates have always been slow, and new features are often missing a degree of polish or even key features. If you look at it from a bird's eye view, only a few dozen employees for a live service game that's reached over 100 million players is shocking, especially considering their competitors have staff in the hundreds. So the big question here is, where is Ubisoft? Where is this $12 billion publisher, and why does the community keep saying the only thing they've done is drive the monetization? Broadly speaking, video game publishers assist with financing to get the game out, QA testing, marketing, distribution, localization, migrating to other platforms, business deals, legal, brand management, and the like, all that business stuff, with primary development usually falling on the team of game devs themselves. Everything is different case by case, of course, with Brawlhalla, for example, likely handling the development across platforms themselves, PS4, mobile, all that, while Risk of Rain 2, for example, primarily had their publisher Gearbox source staff to do that. You'd think that since being acquired, Brawlhalla would get funding or something to beef up their staff dramatically and push out more consistent growth-oriented updates. Publishers traditionally take a cut of the profits, so it would make sense that a publisher would want to invest more in the studio. And if they started to suffer, it wouldn't be crazy to also assume they need to dip into the cookie jar more frequently and with bigger portions. But from what we've heard, Brawlhalla seems to operate mostly independently from Ubisoft, and there's little mention, if ever, of the parent company offering them assistance, other than perhaps the licensing deals for those crossovers. Anytime there's any kind of development update, they talk about doing everything themselves and have almost never mentioned Ubisoft's help at all. It would be impossible to separate Brawlhalla's 2020s era success from these crossovers, but unless you looked deeper, you would never guess it was a Ubisoft game. Yet, it's beginning to have the trademarks of modern-day Ubisoft practices, so much so that the community blames Ubisoft for every unsavory update. And again, development speed has not appeared to change since Ubisoft got involved, but the monetization has. So, what can we glean from this from Brawlhalla to then extrapolate to other games? As we've now learned from the experience of the Brawlhalla community, the future stagnation, growth, or even shrinkage of a live service game seems to, at some level, always come down to risk, with Brawlhalla really not taking any, at least from the outside. And the same reason large gaming studios are dismantling their smaller titles and cutting future releases out of their schedule. They don't want to take the risk. In a way, modern-day live service is a kind of microcosm for the industry as a whole. Live service games are supposed to be these perpetual motion machines that make a certain amount every month to sustain their overhead and grow profits for whatever company they're a part of. But in order to sustain that overhead, you either need to constantly acquire new players, or as we talked about in the very beginning of the video, dig deeper into your existing hole. People aren't going to be satisfied with the same thing forever after all. They need updates every week, new seasons every month, new characters every quarter. And when the business model requires these parameters for everyone to maintain their jobs, scaling up staff may seem like too big of a risk to take. Betting on these young developers on this new title might not pan out, but you know how much money Assassin's Creed is gonna make. After all, the games are profitable right now, and you don't want to endanger the studio by significantly increasing your costs. Brawlhalla is composed of a small team of passionate developers that love their game and love their community, but the game has been largely the same for half a decade. It's a quintessential rock and hard place. Make your team larger and risk losing it all in a big burst of flames, but maintain the status quo and you may slowly fade out of relevance. In order to create cool titles with the maximum number of players, much of the industry has perhaps pigeonholed themselves into a constant cycle of crunch development, with the classic die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain mantra championed by their own fans. And many of these titles, in particular the ones with mandatory online services despite being single-player games, levy their online model to excuse releasing an unfinished game in order to meet the studio's deadlines, regardless of how much time the developers actually need. Games that, upon failing to survive the market, get taken down entirely, with the players who purchased the game under the belief that it was something they owned since they, bought it, no longer having access. But traditional models of buying one game one time aren't so sustainable for those big publishers anymore, what with the increasing costs, increasing expectations, and price fatigue mentioned earlier. Hence the transition into a type of live service model everywhere. But as Bald describes, quote, faced with rising costs of operation, shrinking player bases, and powerful competitors, new live service titles are forced to call it quits earlier than ever. The industry morphed itself into a deluge of support beacons for an always online model fit for our now always online world. But as the resources are drying up, the big players are desperately trying to get their money in while they still can. Whether Ubisoft is forcing their more aggressive monetization practices into Brawlhalla, or if it's both parties independently choosing the same route as a proven means of thriving in the new online economy, doesn't really matter as much as why they'd spiral down that route to begin with. And sure, the easy answer is once again, they want more money, but that's not really satisfying, and now we're armed with a lot more information. From the research, it seems more accurate to say, in order to create the vision of the game they want, something potentially paradigm-shifting, genuinely life-changing even, modern live titles have to contend with the unstable global video game bubble. A profit-first system perpetuated by the few that rake in obscene profits on the backs of the many. A business model requiring new and innovative, often Machiavellian methods to guarantee constant growth. And regardless of their fanbase's contempt, most capitulate to the demands placed upon them by a larger entity or by their own ever-increasing costs to push revenue as far up as they can in the short term, else risking the closure of their studio and livelihood snatched away in a moment, as their very existence was only made possible in the first place from a cascading wave of systems and investments made on the presumption that the hamster wheel could just keep on spinning. Or basically, a lot of these games are stuck in a hole they dug themselves into, that exists inside another ginormous hole the industry has been excavating for 40 years. That's not to give games with egregious monetization practices an out, but more to say we're being siphoned at both ends. Over the past few years, developers with player-first intentions have been crushed by the machine, which was not malfunctioning, but in fact operating exactly as it's been designed. And in turn, players who have less spare income than ever are served a worse product with a worse experience. I do not believe that most developers want to create something that people dislike. I think they're there for a job, yes, and the majority of the team often isn't in the creative, brainstorming, stereotypical artiste role where expressing themselves to the world is the primary driver for their existence, but it's an industry built on passion first, from people who love games, love their games, and love that other people love their games. If you've talked to people who work in the industry, they say you gotta have thick skin because it is tough. But their love for games is what pushes them through it. If you're this far in the video, I'm sure you know as well as I that video games have the potential to be stunning, heart-wrenching, liberating works of art. And all the best suits with all the best business acumen in the world, optimizing every micro sliver of your attention, will never be able to capture what a high school kid making ROM hacks in his bedroom seems to innately understand. In a way, I'm frustrating myself in my own video because I don't think I've even mentioned the word fun a single time in the last 50 minutes. I'm no economist. Numbers and system analysis is so far out of my wheelhouse, I had to repeat kindergarten. Feelings, emotions, that's my area. That's what I care about most. Small scale, small community, seeing the difference you make in one person's life. And as analytical as we can get about the numbers and systems and decades of growth initiatives crumbling before our eyes, what really matters is if the games are good. This is a video about Ubisoft, about Brawlhalla, about global studios reeling from the seeds they planted, but strangely, this is really a video about authenticity. I don't know what the future holds, but despite this video's entire existence probably pointing to the contrary, I'm not really a doomer about it either. I think we may have to end up saying goodbye to some things we took as given, as especially the big names in the industry are built upon large systems that are failing right now, but in their wake, something new will come about. Not a phoenix rising from the ashes necessarily, but just on the belief that people will always strive to create, and specifically create something meaningful to them, which then others will connect to. Sweeping statistics never tell the story of the individual, nor are they deterministic of what that individual will become. By all accounts, I should have turned out to be an absolute failure given the amount of time it took to reach first grade, but look at me now, sitting here talking to you. So I guess sometimes they are deterministic, but what I'm getting at is a trend doesn't mean truth. While the state of the gaming industry is scary right now, there still are some names thriving and more individual developers are starting up their first projects now than any time in history. Gone are the days when the prospect of releasing a video game is only feasible under a larger banner. The numerous solo or small studio indie success stories are proof of that. Creativity isn't dead, we're just being beat down by the weight of the world around us. Industry-wide shrinkage is not good. In fact, it's very bad, and a ton of amazing people are out of work for no fault of their own. That's a real monster of a limitation looming over something many of us hold close to our chests. But I think if I left this weird video essay merely suggesting that the global studio collapses and Charmeleon commodified fighting games were the canaries in the coal mine for the death of the medium, I feel like I'd be missing the secret ingredient that makes any of this work in the first place. People. It's the people, the game developers I've grown up together with, the creators in my local community, my online community. A ping pong tournament with the esports director of a 2D flash game at 11 p.m. in a 9-person Airbnb in Valencia, Spain the evening after a 3-day, 16-hour tournament workday gauntlet. It's always the people. As much as I've been harping on numbers going down, there is, of course, the juggernaut of Fortnite. A game that, by industry trends, should have dropped off the map entirely many years ago. But because of its expansion into user-generated games leveraging the creativity of its massive player base to widen its scope, it is on top of the world right now. Just kidding, Minecraft completely owns them. Yes, it's Minecraft. We all knew this. I did get you for a second though, didn't I? If we're talking about a huge community with masses of young, hungry creators and unprecedented growth that's lasted throughout years and eras, of course, it's Roblox. I tricked you again. Yes, I did. I am so sorry. We're actually talking about Roblox here. Roblox crushes everyone. These numbers displayed on the graphs here are from the end of 2024, and they're trouncing every other platform. And still in 2025, they exploded even more. Now, I'm not going to get into the innumerous security issues Roblox has as a service and child labor exploitation. I don't know what's going on there. The main point here being Roblox's massive success can be attributed to its easy accessibility for pretty much anyone to develop a game. You can't really compete against a platform that has millions of people developing something on it every single day, and sure, most are probably terrible. But that's one of the only growth directions amidst live service failure and battle pass fatigue that's still sticking. Creations made by the players, the users. And if we zoom out once again, it's the same reason why TikTok is absolutely demolishing games. Also, there's like a billion children, the iPad is too powerful, but regardless, the idea that anyone can design a game, an experience, and open it up to the world to see it is awesome, and that's something I think we can draw from. Yes, Roblox has insane problems with creeping monetization, worse than anything else I've mentioned so far, but the idea that the gaming company on top of the world right now is fundamentally one that thrives on creativity is at least a silver lining, I think. Maybe that's naive, but extrapolating this to a smaller scale can also have some positive case studies. Rivals of Aether's Steam Workshop is no doubt a large reason for its cult following. Skyrim's modding community has kept that game alive for who knows how long, and going back to Minecraft, I know I threw you a little misdirect, but the community's creativity really is king there. I'm not saying games should just offset work to the community. Well, okay, I would like to see greater mod support and community integration more universally, but that's beside the point. I'm just positing that while the financial side of gaming is struggling, ideas are still surviving. But alright, I know it got a little loopy there, so let me tie this back into the main thesis of the video. I talk about all of this to say it's not hopeless. As long as creativity has some space to be fostered, people will find a way to make it work. And you know, sometimes the limitations are the very thing that iron out the very best inside of us. There's that mythos of the Beatles, frustrated and demoralized by the technical limitations of live performance equipment, opting to instead compose an album physically impossible to perform live. Riding an early wave of music production development to make one of the greatest albums of all time, and triggering a cascade of innovation after innovation after innovation after innovation, and now an FL Studio demo version you open for 12 minutes can sit idle on your desktop. It's crazy. Looking at games, there's Silent Hill's eerie fog due to a lack of processing power. Mario 64's genius sandbox design because they were limited in how many levels the cartridge could handle. Metal Gear, pioneering the stealth genre as we know it because the MXS2 was so bad it couldn't handle more enemies on screen. Toby Stark
was able to build this in a cave! With a bunch of scraps!
Sweeping trends do not tell the story of individuals. And when I hear the accounts of Concerned Ape creating Stardew Valley, Local Thunk with Balatro, Duncan Drummond and Paul Moore starting Risk of Rain as their college project, and if we go back, a small group of 5 gamers in a swampy, bug-ridden basement in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, chasing their dream and starting the community that I would call home for a decade. When I hear that, I am inspired to make something in my own way. Inauthenticity has never been more prevalent, not just in gaming, money, and corporations siphoning as much as they can with microtransactions, but look at AI job hunting. Look at all of these course gurus and rage bait everywhere is rage bait, every sentence is rage bait. We are yearning for something human, something actually real to cut through the noise. So those good games, those things made with heart and passion, and from people that understand what it's like to be on the other end, they matter. And for many of us, for this specific time in our lives, they matter now more than they ever have. During the making of this video, Hollow Knight Silksong not only had its release date announced, but the game launched to an unprecedented mass reception. This indie title by a small team crashed PlayStation servers, the Nintendo eShop, even Steam, because so many people were trying to buy it. While I don't think this is a replicable situation, Silksong managed to generate one of the greatest marketing campaigns of all time by releasing a banger game and staying next to silent for 6 years. Why? Well, fundamentally, people believed in them. They believed in the team. They believed in the people. Authenticity can cut through, even if the back half of the 2020s is presenting brand new challenges. The future may lie in independent studios and developers not bound to the publishing whims of giants, but even with those locked in contract, there's clear areas for improvement. Let's say hello to our old friend Brawlhalla one last time. Team over there is trying to steer the ship around. It's clear they want to make cool things and their new art is genuinely great. The main problem with it all was the deceptive marketing. And after mass community backlash, they've finally removed the fake discount and now advertise the 900 base price for those ascended variants as it should be. It doesn't feel amazing to be happy with that, but in a world where it seems like companies just don't care about you at all and your voice means nothing, at least they listen. And that aforementioned office hours broadcast, it was universally appreciated by their community, and hopefully something good comes from the feedback they say they're now actively asking for. On the broadcast itself, they showed incomplete mock-ups, mentioned behind-the-scenes challenges, and talked shop with their Twitch chat about what features people were most anticipating over the next couple years. It was refreshingly transparent and also human. Not a corporate response to backlash, but human. Quote-unquote forever games need to keep being forever games even when the global economy is in the dumps. And as a live service, they can't just buckle down silently for months on end while they work on new features. Silksong hype worked in particular because people weren't actively playing the game on their servers. But promising new things only for the community to wait and wait with no substantial updates is also frustrating for both parties, I imagine. Injecting more and more monetization without any admission of it just feels slimy, but if studios collaborated more with their own communities, or even just advertised why they're making certain choices with more honesty, I think there could be a middle ground that, while not perfect, is certainly better than what we have now. It doesn't feel amazing to have an 1100 mammoth coin bundle shoved in your face, but if there was some kind of statement like, hey, we recognize this is not for everyone, but this is the direction we need to go in right now, like that would at least feel better. Though that's assuming live service as we know it will stick around and the current big boys won't just absorb everyone else, which is the direction things have been going. As we've learned today, surviving in the gaming industry is incredibly difficult, and you don't want to shatter your fragile ecosystem if you're the 1 in a million that actually made it. But players are getting smarter, and communities can sniff out when they're being taken advantage of. Corporations are rightfully less popular than ever, and the average gamer is more cognizant of deceptive microtransactions after a decade of being force-fed. All the while, the vast majority of people's paychecks are not going nearly as far. Something has to change. The ending of this video is, by nature, inconclusive. Perhaps the world will create economic headwinds and everything will turn around for games, resulting in a return to the status quo. Perhaps big studios will slowly deteriorate more and more, releasing empty shells of games to salvage their balance sheets, and smaller studios will succeed in the vacuum. Perhaps more developers will try to adopt a greater community-first approach amidst a media space filled with vapid noise and find dedicated fanbases that help them thrive through word of mouth. I don't know. I don't have a grand statement to leave you with here or leave myself here, as much as I would want one, nor do I expect this to provoke any sort of re-examinations of beliefs, as I imagine many of you have been innately feeling what I've been talking about for this entire video before even clicking. And also the odds I made it off the second monitor are slim to none. I just found the stats interesting, connecting it to a small story felt poignant to my own experience, and considering alternate directions gives me hope for what the future may hold. I'm gonna be honest, I'll probably never make another video like this ever again, so please don't subscribe, you'll probably be disappointed. Instead, give a compliment to your mom, tell your friends you love them, bring over food for your neighbor, go for a walk in the sun, I don't know. Good luck. I hit my mic, my gamers and whatever journey life has in store for you. I'm gonna go try beating Enter the Gungeon for the first time, so see you in 79 hours. Bye-bye.